Hello, welcome to another Zombiepalooza radio live show. We're going to be talking tonight about the creators of a anthology called The Voices Within. The Voices Within is a deeply disturbing, complex mash of 22 stories that are beautifully done, and the reviews that are coming in are amazing. And I don't really like that word amazing because it really doesn't really deeply describe enough what this book is about. But as you listen to the authors that are going to be coming on shortly, within the next 4 minutes or so, I want you to really think about what your idea of horror is and see if you agree with the authors and what they believe their sense of horror is. And if you do, then get out and go purchase this book, which is live currently on Amazon.com. It is called The Voices Within Anthology. It is published by Stitched Smile Publications. So I was doing some research earlier today for this particular production of this show, and I was trying to figure out what it is about horror that people really enjoy or really think that it is. And then I was thinking about the people that actually create this, and I found this. Horror writers are perceived rather differently than any other writer. People don't assume that romance writers live a life of unbridled passion and heaving bosoms. Well, not all the time. Horror writers, on the other hand, are considered to be entirely nice, or not entirely nice. There's a division line there. They're thought to be devil worshippers and baby-eating persons, and they're sometimes considered daily fare for authors of dark fiction. They're assumed to never wear anything but the color black, and they're pictured as pale white figures who sit about gazing at skulls with smoking while smoking substance and drinking gobs and gobs of wine or alcohol. Mystery writers are seldom asked, why do you write that stuff? And when a science fiction writer is asked, where do you get your ideas? The questionnaire becomes very friendly and inquisitive. That question posed to a horrorist is occasionally accompanied by fear, loathing, and the writer's immediate need for legal counsel. And I've talked to a couple of those people when I was at Horror Hotel a couple of weeks back. They very often are looked at by mainstream society as having some kind of thing wrong with their thinking. But what I have found is that people who write in horror are not only incredibly intelligent, but they are very connected with what is going on in the world and what is happening with people in general. And so if you're considering writing in the horror genre, what I would like you to do is go ahead and do that. Bring me your scariest, most demonically possessed or most crazed line of thinking and put it out on paper. Don't stop yourself from doing what you love to do. And once you sink yourself into the horror genre, I don't believe you're ever going to leave. So we're going to bring on our first guest now. And our first guest is Justin Gowland. And I'm going to go over to the Facebook and maybe get a link over there to him. I just talked with him a few minutes ago, so I know that he is there. And Justin Gowland is coming from the UK. go ahead and click that link. Hopefully everything will be working the way it's supposed to, and we're going to be bringing Justin on. Justin Gowland's contribution to the voices within is Night Train Fights. And we're going to be talking to him about how he created this and what drives him to write in the genre of horror. Ah, dead air. Okay, come on, Justin. It's time to get over here. Don't you love live streaming shows? And I'm going to be sans Dead Door and Crunchy for a while. I have a couple of other things that are in the works, but his handler had to get a regular day job, so we're working on it, trying to make things go the way they need to. There he is. Welcome to Zombiepalooza Radio, Justin. Let's test your sounds and make sure everything is a go.
Can you hear me okay? Is that all right?
Can. Yes, I can. Hi, how are you?
I am fantastic, thank you.
Good. And what time is it over there in the UK land?
2 minutes past 1 in the morning.
All right, here we're going to do this. Your story is Night Train Fights, and you are in the Voices Within Anthology that Stitch Smile Publications has produced, and as recently on the 22nd it went live.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about you as a background creative while I pull up your information that you sent me, and introduce yourself to our...
Well, I class myself as a paraplegic chronic writer. I'm in a wheelchair. I've been writing since I was 9 years old. But I've only just started getting out there in the last couple of years or so. In fact, I was on your show, I think it was last year, promoting some of my other books. But I'm quite happy to be picked up by Stitch Smile Publications. They've been nothing but fantastic for me, so I'm over the moon with doing that.
So talk to me about what you believe horror, especially dark horror, needs to have.
Psychological effect more than anything else. It needs to shock the reader, or at least put the reader in the place where they really want to look over their shoulder whilst they're reading, just to make sure that certain psychopaths and other people aren't behind them, sort of thing.
Do you ever get anybody that asks you or questions why you write in the horror genre?
Yeah, most of it spans back to the first story I ever wrote, which was a short story I wrote for school. It was an essay sort of thing. And the teacher said to write something from your imagination. And my imagination's always been quite, how should I put it, dark and disturbing. So I've always been interested in horrors. They don't shock me, they don't frighten me. For point of fact, the first horror film I ever watched at the tender age of 8 years old was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the actual original 1970s sort of horror. So,
what was it about? What was it about that film that grabbed you and said, "This is really interesting"?
Well, over here it was banned when it first came out, which is why we had pirated copies on the old VHS cassettes and things, and it was the blood and the gore and the way that the suspense and everything was set up for me sparked my imagination with regards to writing horror and writing sort of zombie apocalypse stories, which is predominantly what I write. But I've just started writing about vampires as well, so I don't know how that book's been going. I haven't been checking my lists lately.
So, what I would like to know is what was going on in your life when you decided to write Night Train Fights?
I've been going through a bit of a bad patch with regards to some mental health issues. I'm ex-forces, so I was going through a bit of PTSD. And a friend of mine had a fight on a train once a long, long time ago when we were on the way back from leave. And it was just a memory of that sparked the idea for the book, for that like short story, I should say.
So when you got the submission request and you saw what Stitch wanted you to do, what did you start immediately on it, or what was?
It took about 2 or 3 weeks to get the sort of idea of where I wanted the short story to go. Because as usual, when I'm writing a story, I like to have a beginning, a middle, and an end already planned out in my head or on a bit of paper, and then I sort of flesh out the little bits that are in between. So I'll have a beginning where I want them to wake up or start the story, a middle bit where there is either some kind of conflict or some bad thing happening, and then the end where it's, and I usually like to have a twist at the end of my series of books or e-book. I like to have a twist at the end. I never like to leave it as simple as they all walked off happily ever after sort of thing. I think the first series of books I wrote, at the end the character, funnily enough called Jay, was killed by his own brother by being beheaded. But you didn't really see that coming at the beginning of the story or anywhere through the story until the last sort of half of the book, I think it is, the last half of the book, the last book. So, but all these little twists and twerks and little things that shock the people, I hope bring them back to me to say, oh, I want to read his books again, or I want to read more of his books, or I want to find all these little short stories that are dotted here and there on the internet.
What was it like for you when they decided to pick yours?
I was over the moon. I like writing. I love writing, and when somebody chooses your particular, short story or book or whatever to publish or to even just put out there, it's always an uplifting effect. It's sort of like, oh, cool, people like reading my books or like reading my stories, and it was just, I was over the moon.
When you go to create characters and you have to talk it or, well, I don't know, do you talk it out? Do you talk out the dialogue, or do you give your script to other people and let them talk it out so you can hear how it plays out?
9 times out of 10, it is I'll speak it out with my wife. She's one of the main reasons I'm actually publishing at the moment. And she'll read through them to me, and I'll go, right, I need to change that, and that. That doesn't sound right. That should have been written this way, and it hasn't come across the way I wanted it to. And then I'll go from there.
What did your wife say after she finished reading Night Train Fights?
I can't swear on the radio.
It was that good, huh?
But it went along the lines of, you are mucking psychotic.
Do you
to that effect.
You ever wonder where this stuff comes from, or is it something that is so much a part of you that it's like, oh, here comes another idea?
No, it's ingrained in me. Um, I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it's there, but quite a few of my stories are really dark in my head. And I'm one of these writers that his brain never stops. It's continually running and continually thinking of new ideas or bits to put into books. Even though I've said I'll have a start, a middle, and an end, the bits in between are always added up differently in my head. I'll write something, then I'll go back a couple of days later and go, no, that's totally wrong. And it's been known that I've wiped about 4,500 words at a time from a book and rewrote the whole lot, or rewrote a whole book from the beginning again because I didn't like the way it was panning out. Um, I just love writing. I love writing.
Do you let's see, how do I want to do this? Because you're in the UK, and a lot of people in the United States absolutely love reading from writers that come from this particular area of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it is that is so dramatically different about the way that you do it as opposed to, say, someone in the United States does it?
To tell you the truth, I don't really. I tend to read a lot more US writers than I do British writers. That's not to say that I don't have a few of my favourites here in England.
Right.
Um, but I think the difference is the colloquialisms. It's the certain ways that people write certain things. Like we'll have certain sayings here in the northeast of England, which is predominantly where I write my books from. And this is the area that I know well, and this is the area that I tend to write about. Most of my stories are in this area. So I'll put in certain ways of speech that we have over here that is different to the way that you would write it over in, in America. And then you have different ways of writing stuff over there than we have over here, and we find it hard sometimes to um, differentiate between the two. But I just enjoy both sets of writing, but mostly American, to tell you the truth.
To be more well versed within writing for horror, I think it is a really good idea to be able to sample from all over the globe.
Mm, mm,
It also helps to be able to formulate new, I guess, maybe not new ideas or concepts, but to see how the people respond to particular situations. Like they're like what scares them or what their fears or what their
mm,
ancestors
mm.
believed was fearful. Some of that is still coming out in horror books today. That kind of reserve, is there something that's like that within the UK that you also bring to your horror?
Um, a different outlook on the zombie genre and particularly the vampire genre at the moment. The way that I'm writing at the moment, my outlooks are different to quite a lot of other people's. Um, most of mine either start off with um, infections via cats and things like that, and dogs, um, and then I've got the leeches, which are a parasitic organism that makes people into zombies, sort of thing. And then there's Otto, my new character in my new vampire series, um, and he's a paraplegic. He's in a wheelchair, and he's a zombie. No, sorry, he's a vampire. Sorry, mistake. He's a vampire. He's in a wheelchair, and his girlfriend is also a vampire, but she is afraid of blood. She faints at the sight of blood. She tends to drink out of a I don't know if they call them Tommy sippy cups. You know, the little baby cups that you can't see
Yes.
into with a little nip on the top.
So she
Yeah,
don't have to look at
yes,
it?
yes, yes. So she doesn't have to look at the blood. She sips out of that. Um, but that starts off with that like funny part at the beginning of the story, and then it gets a bit more dark and a bit more serious as he's reminiscent of how he became a vampire and his life up until that point and all the rest of it, and his enemies and all the rest of it. So my is from that sense of humor, you can see where my books are. They're not straight down the line. It's a zombie apocalypse. Everything's got to be serious.
Right.
I've got
You
to
know,
have
well,
funny things in it or not.
we need that kind of almost graphic humor, gallows humor that goes into a horror piece, because if we kept slapping him upside the head with one horrific thing after another, there'd be no time to breathe, in no pause, and then the piece is just looked at like some sort of fantastical thing that could never happen.
Yeah.
I think if you go ahead and you take the time to pace it and get that breather every once in a while, that people can either catch up to where you are, or they can settle in and be lulled back into the sense of security or safety.
Yes, that's quite. I mean, that's the main reason I write my books the way that I write my books. I don't want it to be a constant shocker. I'd rather have bits where they think, oh, it's going nice and easy for them, and then bam, then hit them with something else, and not constantly just, like you said, hit them over the head.
Do you think that sometimes putting in absurdity into horror adds to the mental build-up for that particular piece?
In some respects, yes. I've read countless numbers of books, and horror is my favorite. And I found that the ones that have certain bits of absurdity in, as long as it's a small amount, not constant in your face slapping, unless they've specified that it's going to be a comedic
Right,
book.
right.
A little bit is good because it makes you giggle. Like Mike Talbot and Zombie Fallout books. He the way that those are wrote make me laugh when certain bits happen, and I mean literally, I will burst out laughing while I'm reading it.
But you know why
And
some people laugh during a horror movie or reading a piece of horror?
because I think they think they don't think it's ever going to happen.
No,
So,
that's not necessarily
well,
true.
I think that's how it is. But that's me. I'm just my head is if it ever did happen, if a zombie apocalypse ever did happen, I'm screwed anyway because I'm in a wheelchair. So I'm just like, I'll take it on the chin, like the rest of them. I'll be the first one to go take me.
I enjoy watching. I do write too. I don't know why I spewed that there, but I enjoy watching British made films and films that are made all over in the UK that talk about apocalyptic events, because they seem to be very kind of not necessarily laid, yeah, but yes, and very dry sense of humor, very like if somebody's getting them bit in a hallway or something like that. And a lot of these places, for some reason, they do the shoots in apartments or in places that have multiple levels, which is cool. But if something's happening to somebody or one of their friends in the hallway, they kind of almost shrug it off, like it's maybe their mind shuts down or whatever it is, but they don't want to know that their friend is being killed,
Yeah,
but they also are not acknowledging it.
yeah. It's the way that us British are. We are. Well, I wouldn't say we're laid back. It's the point where um, you just don't believe it unless it's right up against your face within about 2 millimeters from your nose. You know, you tend to shrug it off and tend to just battle on and just keep going.
Right.
Um, but if it was, if it happened, you could be guaranteed there'd be people exactly like Shaun of the Dead walking around with cricket bats and things like that. So you know,
It's said that horror works best when horror is honest.
yes, yes.
Talk about
Um, I think an honest horror story is one where it's not too fantastical. It's not too how should I put it? Um, unbelievable. It's got to be based sort of in fact. Um, Things like 28 Days Later, the Rage virus, and that storyline is based in actual fact with regards to the animal testing on certain primates. Um, and then you've got the other side of the thing where you've got the Crazies, which is based in America, which is about a chemical leak in a small midwestern town that turns them all slightly off kilter. Um, But you've got to think that's back to the sort of LSD days where they were testing out LSD-6 on
right.
soldiers and things like that. That's all based in fact. That makes you believe that that could actually happen. It's
Right.
when you get.
Especially when the media gets a
Mhm,
hold of it. And if there happens to be an incident, of course, and it's bloody and disgusting, and they're going to throw it out
mhm.
there and they're going to be like, oh my
Oh yeah.
God, this is what's
Mhm,
going on. Everybody needs to be afraid of all of this. No, you need to be aware that certain things are happening and make sure that you are either, I mean, if you need to be away from that, then
mhm,
move away, or but there's always going to be that 10% that's going to go in there. And I think that's what horror writers are. They're included in that good 10% where they
mhm,
run into that and they go, let me envelop my entire self into this and
mhm.
see what I can put out.
Yeah, yeah. And that's particularly what my books, what I try to do in my books, and that story that Night Train Fights is all about. It's to take it to that place where you think it could happen, but there's still the funny side of things in it as well. I take a lot of sort of my life experience and put them into my books as well. Um, Quite a few of them are ex-army based books, you know, with regards to the characters. They were in the army or they were security guards, which I've done both.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you've got the other flip side of the coin with Otto in his wheelchair. I'm in a wheelchair. You know, I take all those little bits and pieces and I put them all together. And at the end, out comes a story, like Night Train Fights, in the Voices Within, um, that um, sort of you would think, that could happen, but hold on, it's still funny and it's still a bit ridiculous. The first fight he does in the night train fight is he's fighting up against a clown, for crying out loud. Everybody got favorite clowns. Come on.
Well, I just, I knew a clown was going to come. I knew a clown was going to be in there somewhere. They just, I don't know. There was a clown that was at Horror Hotel. Skippy the clown.
Hmm.
Um, I I avoided. I was supposed to do an interview with him, but I avoided doing a live Facebook interview with him just because I was like just totally creeped out I knew there was a man in there, and I knew that he really didn't look like that. But the whole thing, and I'm thinking, how am I going to get out of this interview?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I got it, because he wears a mask, and it's creepy as. And I'm thinking, all right, so I'm gonna do this live interview, but I can't hear him very well. And if I can't hear him very well when he answers the questions, the people on the live Facebook aren't going to be able to hear him either.
Mm-hmm.
And so, hey, I got it. And that's what I went with. And I'm like, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So,
Right.
but I am going to bring him on as the persona of Skippy, but I'm going to have him do sans makeup so that I can actually get through the interview. And I know he's going to be watching this at some point, and so I just, I'm sorry, but that.
Well, I mean, I've always had a little thing about clowns, and I thought I might as well put it in that story, and it's the story that kicks it, I think.
So, what I think is that horror needs to shake up your anxiety, and when you are an author, the words tumble out onto the page from everything from your personal experience to maybe experience that somebody else has had to what your perception of what is going on in this particular situation. And if you can do that and convey everything without having to explain it and just let the words explain what's going on, that's brilliant.
Yeah. I've been noted a couple of times by friends and family who do the odd reading for me that I do tend to go into a bit too much detail. So I have to curve back a bit. So sometimes, although it looks like I should write more about a fight, I've been told that the fight scenes or the gore scenes, as I put them, are too gory. So I have to rein myself back in a bit because my gore level's quite high, and other people's gore levels are sort of very low. Point of fact, my wife got terrified the first book I wrote.
Oh,
Well, what happened was I gave her my first book. I wrote it all by myself. I didn't have an editor or anything like that at the time, and this was the first one I was going to put out. And what happened was the characters are called reapers, and they make like a howling sort of hooting, screeching noise. And my partner read the first 3 chapters of the book, and she went to bed. And we have a boatload of trees out the back of our house, and she'd left the window open, and there was an owl in the trees hooting and screeching. And
she's like, you brought this.
she said, yeah.
You did that.
She said she would never read any of my books ever again. So that's why I have to give her my books in little bits to read.
You know what I told my husband? I'm like, I do a lot of work, spiritual work and paranormal work, and I often tell him, I said, if you keep thinking about something or you write something and you put it out there, you have a big chance that some of that is gonna just pop out and happen at some point. They're right, or freak them out so that they don't want to go outside anymore. Or stay in their house anymore, or no place is safe anymore. It is an incredible ability to be able to reach into that depth and pull back out something that is incredibly astounding, and be able to like say, okay, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Well, that's how my first book was thought of and never went through with my wife. So I'm over the moon with that.
All right, I need you to put out any of your social media links so that people can find where you are. So please go do that while I bring on our next guest, David Court.
Okay, thank you very much.
Give me your links. Justin, you were supposed to hang out while I went and got David Court. But all right, we're going to make sure that Justin Gowland's links are up on the Facebook page. Zombiepalooza Radio Live on Facebook. We are Zombiepalooza 13 on Twitter, and we are Zombiepalooza Radio Live on Facebook radio. That's our official radio page. And let me think, is there anything else I need to put out there? Probably we have a Google Plus page. We also have a Instagram page, which is picking up quite nicely. Appreciating our followers on Instagram. Instagram is Zombiepalooza Radio. So I'm trying to get David Court. He is also over in the UK. Please click the link so we can bring you on. We're bringing in a lot of people over from the UK, and he says he clicked the link, but I don't see him. Okay. Huh. All right. You're not in the room though. Let's see if I can get Joshua. Is my link still live? Google Chrome is what you need to use when you are coming on to Zombiepalooza Radio Live, especially when we're doing the show on Facebook. And I think we have him. Yay!
Yay! I had to click join, that was all.
Well, what was the deal? What the heck? What the heck? All right, give me a second. Let me put you up. There you are on the big board. All right.
Good evening.
Well, good evening. And what time is it over there?
It is 1:30 in the morning over here after a weird political day, as you've probably seen.
I'm an American. I have nothing to say about anything political that is on your side of the pond. I've seen only things in my feed, and there are some people that are happy about it, and there are some people that are not happy about it. Kind of like the United States, but
very much so at the moment over there, yeah.
Boy. All right. So what I need you to do while I go and pull up the rest of your stuff is I need you to tell people who you are, what genre you write in mostly, and the name of the piece that you have in the anthology, The Voices Within.
My name is David Court. I kind of fell into writing by accident. I primarily tried to start off as a sci-fi writer, yet have kind of ended up falling into horror, as it were. And my piece in the Stitch Smile anthology is Blasphemous Tumours, which is a not too subtle Depeche Mode reference, just right there in the title.
Oh, I love Depeche Mode.
I love Depeche Mode too.
You know.
Any excuse for Depeche Mode put in the title, I'm there.
All right, so I'm interested in what tweaks you to the gear of horror, but not just any horror, that dark, deeply disturbing horror.
I like, I think I kind of fell into writing that affects people. Horror is really because it gives a good visceral response from people. I like the fact that you can get an immediate response from an audience who are genuinely shocked or taken aback by what you write. I like writing stuff that makes an impact. Sci-fi less so, but horror you generally get a result quite quickly from it. It's just I think I had this conversation the other day. It's like porn. It's like it makes an impact very, very quickly, and a very visceral impact, and a very obvious one as well.
So what was going on in your life at the time when you decided to write Blasphemous Tumours?
Blasphemous Tumours was an interesting one. It was based around a drunken conversation I'd had several years back, in which a group of friends and I were talking about. I'm trying to think what it came about. It came about from talking about useless superheroes, and someone came up with a character called Casper the Friendly Ghost, Casper the Friendly Tumour. Yeah, exactly. And I always had this. I always had this idea in my head: what if cancer was sentient? Cancer gets a bad rap. That's a horrible thing to say.
But all right. This is where we bring in the gallows humor and that very kind of darkly sense of making. What is wrong? Is there something wrong?
I've been looking around your page for a while trying to refresh. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong.
That's okay. It's still going. I'm sure we're fine.
Are we still on?
Yeah. Just give me a second. A program note from our director over there. I need you to get my phone and I'll check it on there. Or actually, just use Lee's phone and see. Just give him my phone. Thank you. While we're burning up minutes with David here, and go ahead and check it on there. So it's important to understand that dark, disturbing horror needs to have something that is based in reality. And
Absolutely.
The fact that cancer has taken so many lives, it doesn't care what age you are or what color you are or what race you are or anything. It's across the board. It's nasty. And you know what? What if it was sentient? What if it just decided that the virus or the disease is more important than the thing that is hosting it, and that there is some sort of reasoning why it needs to be and why we can't stamp it out?
That was the thing behind it. It's kind of the symbiotic relationship between the cancer and its host, which is where I tried to take this. And it's quite an extreme thing. That's where I tried to take the story. It's kind of I kind of tried to give it a humorous angle as well, which seems quite odd. But I kind of fall into the humorous angle quite a lot with my horror.
So when Stitch decided to pick this piece for their anthology, The Voices Within, how did you find out about it, and what was your first thought?
Well, I'll admit it was kind of at a stage where I was just sending a lot of stuff onto the ether, as in the fact I was probably my most productive period in several years. So I was churning out 2 stories a week. So I just sent a lot of them stuff randomly out into the ether, and then Stitch Smile got back to me, and I was amazed by the fact it was probably one of those professional response letters I'd ever got from anything as well, which is really nice. But yeah, generally, I'll admit that I hadn't done a great deal of research into Stitch, so didn't really know a great deal about them, other than just going on the website and the like. But yeah, really generally impressed. But since then, it's been absolutely amazing. I think I was saying to you the other day, I don't think I've ever known a publishing house quite like them. It's really quite remarkable.
They have a tendency to be able to pick the people for their house very meticulously and make sure that you have something that's unique and that they are truly able to enjoy, and that it doesn't have that what do you call that, commercial sense to it. It needs to have something that comes from around the corner and just kind of like scares the crap out of you, and you're like, oh.
But yeah, but yeah, genuinely pleased to be a part of it. And nice to see it's doing so well in the sales figures today as well, which is always a pleasant surprise. Because the usual writer-publisher relationship I'm experienced with is you send it off, you get an acceptance back, and then you occasionally get a royalty letter every 6 months or so, and that's about the end of it.
Right.
So, no, all right. Genuinely nice to see a company that's so involved with the writers. It's quite touching, in fact.
It's very cool. What for you needs to be put in place for a good dark horror piece?
Horror's a weird one, isn't it? As in the fact that we've got so many different things that scare different people. It's tapping into that thing that you know is going to. Lowest common denominator is a horrible expression to use. It's writing the story that you're going to try and affect as many people as possible. Or what's the point of doing it in the first place? I'd argue. So that's where I try and approach it from. So it's taking common themes. I quite like the idea of the fact the boogeyman isn't some supernatural terror lurking at the bottom. It's that idea that it's just your next door neighbour, or the person down the street, or the person you're passing in the street, or it's trying to move away from the supernatural and moving into the real. Effectively, that's what works for me.
And all right, so where I'd like to go from here is, we were talking earlier in first half hour about what kinds of elements that come from what is going on now in the world and how it translates into how authors depict them on the paper. And I'm wondering, from that particular stance, what it is and how it is that you go and you create. Does it have an effect on you at all? I know that for this piece that it did, but what about the range of your other work?
Well, that's quite a deep question, isn't it? The world's a terrible. I think in my 45 years of existence, the world's never been in quite a bad a state as it is at the moment. Where do I take it from as a writer? If anything, I'd say the cancer issue was a departure from the usual. I try and keep away from real world issues as far as possible, because I like my writing to be a departure from that, if anything. I'll admit my writing isn't the most topical. Yeah, but I try and steer away from that, because as the fact that the real world stage is so flexible anyway, so it's difficult to tap into any particular aspect of it at any point, I'd say. So yeah, I try and steer away from it. I'd argue as a whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, all right. So, what other kinds of works do you have to offer besides Blasphemous Tumours that you've recently gotten accepted for?
A lot of short stories. Like I was saying, I came into this whole writing lark quite late. I've literally only been writing for probably the best part of less than 2 years now. So I come from a technical writing background, so fiction was a way of being a bit creative for a change, because my day-to-day job is quite mundane technical writing. A lot of short stories. I try and remain humorous wherever I can. So I'm really heavily inspired by Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett, even though I've never been a great fan of fantasy. I like the very British humour that Douglas Adams has, and the fact that it translated quite well over the pond as well works well. Humorous horror and science fiction, I'd say, is the genre I'm trying to appeal to, but I suppose time will tell whether that's an effective marketing technique or not.
I'm trying to figure out if this actually is broadcasting. I usually have someone with me to make sure that they can hear and see everything that's going on, and there does seem to be some sort of a technical issue. And
I'll admit, earlier on I was concerned whether you were on at all, because I was trying about 15 minutes ago and I couldn't see any live broadcast.
Oh, I am kind of perplexed by this. I'm wondering if I should just go ahead and make a new link, or
yeah, because it was literally only when I got the link through that I was wondering whether it was going to go ahead at all. But I presume you're still recording it, right?
I don't know if this is going to go out, and I won't know that until I hit the stop broadcast.
Oh, right. Okay. So yeah, I'm with you.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to continue using this link until your time is up, and then I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to put create another link. So I'm hoping that it works. If it doesn't, then what I'll do is I'll just bring you back on, and we'll make sure that it gets. I got all kinds of things that happen during these particular shows, and sometimes the streams and stuff do not always pick up right away.
Right,
and people will be like, well, okay, I know that you had a show, but what was going on? Well, all right. So
I'm easy.
when you go into reading the genre of horror, what for you are you looking for when it comes to film?
What sort of horror films? I'm a really big fan of body horror. It's my two major fears in life. I am very claustrophobic, so claustrophobic horror works really well for me on a personal level. The Descent was amazing. Despite the fact that lots of people think it's a really average film, it really worked on a quite basic visceral level for me, just because it was so claustrophobic. And body horror as well. I had a real bad health scare about 6 years ago, and I liked body horror before that, but ever since then it's become a bit of an obsession. So Clive Barker's stuff and Cronenberg stuff. Yeah, body horror. So yeah, they're the two types of horror that really work well for me. I'm kind of bored of slasher movies, and occasionally one comes along that really makes a mark on me. But yeah, on the whole, it's body horror works really well.
So we're going to talk a little bit about characters and what they need to have. Besides compelling ideas and strong writing, and of course a sensible plot, you need characters that are filled with a great story and a great reasoning for being in the story. We don't just want like a bunch of blood dumped on our head and have the viewer or the reader expected to just slurp it up. It's got to have
we need characterization.
Yeah, so talk about how you go into developing your characters.
Well, that was an interesting thing because I traditionally work in short stories, which in my mind effectively write themselves. I've got the end in view before I ever start them. Probably the only, my first full length novel is the only one I've ever had a proper approach to. Characterization doesn't really, I don't really need as much of it in short stories. It does exist to a certain extent, but because you're only living with these characters for 10, 15, 20 pages, there's not a great deal for it. But I mean, with Version Control, the first ever full length thing I wrote, which was intended, I'll be honest, was intended to be a lovely 70,000 word thing and ended up being 110,000 words. I would argue overboard with the characterization, as in the fact I sat down, 3 main characters, properly sat down, worked out their entire story arcs before even starting writing on the story. And I would argue all 3 of them were based on people I've either met or know in real life, or people I know of.
Right.
Which was an interesting approach. So I almost wrote the characters in view of the mind of what would these people have done in real life, how these people approach these situations. So that was quite an interesting challenge for me, having never really done that before, because I've been traditionally just used to working within the realms of short stories, which is a nice approach, and which worked for me. It was interesting, the concept of spending several months noting and writing stuff down and having folders about character details before even starting writing, putting a word down on a page, which is quite an interesting exercise.
So you are you more of a planner and having a clear vision of where you're going before the story starts, or do you do a development process as you're going along?
Usually not with short stories, but this was an interesting one. I mean, I'd always had the idea of what my first novel would be about, but all I had in my mind originally was beats. In fact, it was the whole thing came around initially. I had an idea several years ago of a really good rug pull, a really good end of second act rug pull, which is what the whole thing was based around, as in the fact that just completely altering the viewpoint of the reader from aspect of sympathising with one character, sympathising with another just overnight.
Mm-hmm.
But it was quite an interesting exercise. So it was all beats. I knew the beats I wanted to have. There were about eight major plot lines I wanted to move through. But again, with short stories, I don't really do it. I'll be honest, they kind of write themselves. So I don't tend to be a planner. But as I knew this would be a long exercise, and I knew I'd be spending at least a year writing this, and because the fact there were so many characters involved, I felt I felt I had to in this case. I come from a computing background, so everything is all about spending months planning, going through the software development life cycle before even putting fingers to keyboard. So I kind of took that approach for my writing, as in the fact that I knew everything about these characters. I knew their blood type, I knew their favourite foods, I knew their favourite drinks, I knew where they liked to hang out in the evening, I knew what their enemies were, who their friends were. I would argue I went into slightly too much detail that isn't needed, that none of it is touched upon in the book. But it felt I wanted to make sure I knew these characters before I started writing about them. But
what would you do if you found yourself at some point as you were writing that you had actually fallen into the world that you were creating, and you had to figure out a way to be able to get out, but you needed help from someone that you hadn't created yet?
Well, that's the beautiful. I come from a comic background as well. A lot of my writing is with comics, and the problem with that is once you've released one issue of something, you can't undo it. The great tool the novelist has is that he can go. It doesn't matter if in that character, if in chapter 8 you need to be rescued by a character you haven't introduced yet, it's all right. You just go back to chapter 2 and you invent that character then. Which is something you can't do in comics, of course, because everything is out in a monthly issue and you're stuck. You can't retroactively. If you retroactively create a character in a throwaway flashback, then you're cheating the audience.
Yes.
It's the great thing in the novelist's toolkit, that fact you can go back and make this shit. This stuff up. It doesn't really matter.
But you know what? There are a lot of people that are out there that find that idea that was just proposed very intriguing, and especially in the times that we are, where there is so much data input and that we are so connected into everything that is electronic.
Yes. Yeah, I guess there is that, isn't there? But yeah, I suppose that's why if I ever was going to write a novel again, I would never release monthly chapters on electronically. I think the whole, you get the whole thing. You get that. I get to cheat. I get to be the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain then, and change all this stuff around on the fly. The audience has no idea what you do behind the scenes before you finally release this thing. All the cheats you've done, all the tricks you've done, and the fact that you've written. God, the amount. Despite the fact that I know these characters, the amount of times, even though I knew the beats at the time, they've written them into a corner. It's like I do not. Right. I do not know how to extricate the character from this situation, or even situations where I've started writing about a character. I know they're acting out of character, but I still keep writing it. It's only when I get to the end of the chapter, this is just rubbish. This character would not have done any of this. So just scrap the whole lot and start again. I hate my characters.
Sometimes though, I find that some of the creatives are saying that they're people that they've created or that have showed up in their works argue with them about what they will do and what they won't do. Have you come across that yet?
I have done a lot, yes. The big problem I had with this was the fact I didn't want to stop writing about these characters. I had the elegant beats where people would meet their various demises and meet the end of their character arcs, and I just enjoyed writing about them, and that's why a 70,000 word story ended up turning into a 110,000 word one. I didn't want to say goodbye to these people. So annoying characters being likable.
What is it like for you when you have to write the closing paragraph for a piece and that's it? There's no more.
In the case of this, it's not too bad because there are still hangovers, and I wanted some of the people to last out the end of this because I want to write more books about these people. So it's not too bad in this case. It was only an au revoir. It wasn't a goodbye in the case of a lot of these characters, I think. But also the interesting approach is I wrote the last chapter first because I knew the beats. I wanted it to take. That was. It was a technique a friend told me about, as in the fact that just aimed towards the end, and and I thought that was quite an interesting approach. So no, the last chapter was the first one I wrote. So everything was just guiding. It was just leading towards this final chapter.
That is interesting. I've heard of some people that have written characters that they know that they want to have toward the middle or slightly towards the end, but doing it that way is very interesting. It does give you some sort of an odd sense of goal. Interesting.
It worked for me. I don't know if I'd ever take that approach again with Recreant. I haven't, because I mean that's my sci-fi one I'm doing at the moment. So I'm about 40,000 words into that at the moment. That's definitely, I'm writing that from start to finish.
Right.
I don't. In fact, I'm not even quite sure how that one's going to end at the moment.
Interesting. All right. I need you to give me your social media links and all of that kind of thing. So go ahead and do that now. Okay.
My own blog. I've got a blog called www.folds5.co.uk. So I was a big Ben Folds 5 fan back in the day, so that kind of inherited I kind of had that handle on the internet for a while. My writer's page is www.davidjcourt.co.uk, and under Amazon I can just be found under David Court.
All right, so David Court has written the piece Blasphemous Tumours. It is going to be found, yes, and is officially found in the anthology The Voices Within, which has been produced by Stitched Smile Publications. I'm gonna give you a little bit of time for a shout out, and then I'm going to shut this down and I'm going to restart it and hope that this interview came out the way that I needed it to. Because
fingers crossed.
It was really good. So who would you like to give a shout out to?
A big shout out to my wife Tara, who's probably both my harshest critic and biggest fan, which is that beautiful combination of things. Big shout out to the Big Comfy Bookshop in Coventry, in Fargo Village, who hosted the site of my very first ever writers meeting, and are hosting my book launch for my short story collection, hopefully later this year. And also a big shout out to my friend Elizabeth Earle, who is a children's book writer, who is doing a big charity thing tomorrow at Big Comfy Books. All
right, Big Comfy Books. Get over there. Do they have a Facebook page or some such?
They do indeed. I'll admit I can't remember the name of it though. But there aren't that many places called Big Comfy Bookshop. So if you look for it, you'll find it.
So get it on the internet, www World Wide Web. We've been talking with David Court. I'm crossing my fingers and everything else that this.
I'm crossing every extremity I have.
I know, right? That this did take, and I will talk to you soon, one way or the other. Thank you so much for joining us. I gotta go.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.